There were no mistakes. Actually, all the mistakes were done before we made Otpor. So it's kind of when people say, "Oh, you managed to make Otpor in 2 years and kind of complete the whole thing," it's like amazing. But actually, Otpor was like a third or fourth attempt I was involved in, and there were many others. So my involvement began in 1996. That's like 2 years before Otpor, with a student protest that took place. Is how I got involved into student organizing and politics in general. And between the failure of that protest and the birth of Otpor, there were at least 3 or 4 attempts that I was involved in that didn't succeed. So in that sense, our ability to learn from our mistakes was actually what created Otpor. So all the mistakes that Otpor did were, how should I say, nothing compared to the mistakes that we did before Otpor. And the two biggest mistakes that we learned from when we made Otpor was to rely on leaders. So previous attempts, and most notably the student protest of 1996, which was my first, how shall I say, experience, was we had very charismatic and visible leaders that were kind of popped up pretty much spontaneously. These were people who had good oratory skills. They clicked with people, and then at one point they decided to do their own thing, which wasn't the thing that most of the students wanted to do, and so that kind of created a disillusionment and apathy and like disappointment among the people. They felt like, oh, we were protesting in the streets only for certain individuals to kind of get exposure, and so they can advance their career, political career, etc., etc. So when we made Otpor, we built on that mistake and tried to kind of correct for it. And so we were trying to make a movement with horizontal structure and collective leadership, so that there is not one single individual that can, how shall I say, decide to pursue a political career, or there is no single individual that can be blackmailed, that can be threatened, that can be bribed, or in certain cases, maybe even killed. So that was the first, how shall I say, learning from mistakes moment. And another one was that, we in the student protest had 4 months of daily demonstrations. We would mobilize thousands of people, in some cases tens of thousands of people. We had daily marches. We occupied the university. The university was on strike. But 500 meters down the road, life was normal. People were going shopping. They were going about their business. Nothing changed. So this other mistake that we noticed and wanted to kind of do it differently was that we need to bring resistance to these people, not wait for people to come to where resistance was. And that totally changed the way we organized. So Otpor didn't have demonstrations. We didn't organize demonstrations and protests. We went where people were, and we tried to kind of bring them into the movement, which finally happened. And this is why, Otpor grew in those 2 years from like a dozen to at the climax around 80,000 people who enlisted, and many more who were mobilized and took part in our activities. Yeah, that was our main philosophy. We had even the like self-mocking slogan: "We don't think, we act." But the whole idea was always to produce a new point of provocation and mobilization. So provocation was aimed at the opponent, so to kind of put them off guard and to also kind of create this event. So usually it would be like a street theater or like a small scale demonstration or any other tactic. Later those were like street blockades and sit-ins and interventions. But the purpose was to kind of create a situation where there is a lot of opportunity for the other side to make a mistake. Because this is what we were trying to do. And this is why innovation was crucial, because we always wanted to do something new that they couldn't use any of the tricks from their playbook. They had to actually improvise, and they're not really good at improvising. And and even if you are improvising, it's better to improvise the first move than to improvise the reaction. And this is so that was one thing, provocation. And the second thing was mobilization. So we were trying to do actions in order to mobilize, in order to recruit people into the movement. Usually what groups do is that they recruit people in order to do an action. So they would go around, mobilize people, recruit them into the movement in order to be able to pull off like a big rally or a big demonstrations. But we were like, we kind of flipped that. So we said, we're going to use these actions to recruit people into the movement. So all these tactics were actually our engine on which the movement grew. And that's why we managed to actually increase in numbers exponentially over such a short period of time, which is 2 years. Yeah, it's just the paperwork. It's not just like the literature that has increased, but actually the overall ability to learn is now greater than ever. I remember in 1998 when we were thinking about making Otpor, so this was still, how should I say, in our kind of contemplation phase. We read in the newspapers that students brought down Suharto in Indonesia, and we were like amazed. We were like, wow, we didn't even know that students could do these things. But there was no way for us to connect with them. This is 1998, stone age of the internet. And so it was just a piece of news. Like today, we would be on their Facebook group like in the next 15 minutes, and we would be connecting with them and have a Skype call later that evening. But that wasn't the case in 1998, So we did do what we could do at the time. We learned a lot from our elders, and so there was, how should I say, there is an organizing tradition, in Serbia and in former Yugoslavia, and we were trying to learn anything that we could from people who did some sort of organizing. And we also tried to kind of connect with who we could connect. So for instance, we did connect with the Slovak students that did a year before, they did a mass mobilization against Mečiar in Slovakia, managed to defeat him in the elections. So we managed to connect with them and actually brought them over, talked to them, and learn from them. And we also tried to kind of find anything that we could on, like in terms of literature and stuff. I remember like there was one publisher that just published Etienne de la Boissy Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, and that was like one thing that I read at the time. We also read like some more sinister books like Technique of the Coup d'etat by Curzio Malaparte, or but we're kind of trying to understand politics from this technical perspective. So today it's actually much easier because now you can do, you can connect, as I said, in no time, and you can search the internet, you can find everything, But on the other hand, what is more difficult now is that, the resources that are available to you as an activist, as an organizer, are the same resources that are available to the other side, and they even have the ability to kind of focus 24/7. They have the resources to kind of really do their work and their homework. So for instance, one of the things that we are doing is trying to understand the pillars of support. So we're trying to understand where a particular pillar stands and how it can be moved or shifted. What they can do is they can actually, just go online, and just going to Facebook, they can actually do a total mapping of like all the connections that an activist has. So not just understanding the overall pillar of support as we do, they can actually go into the nitty-gritty details, and they can understand completely. So a lot of things that are available, we have to also kind of remember that the regimes that we're talking about, it's really for them a matter of survival. So they are going to invest a lot of resources to do their homework. How shall I say? I like to see it as a first book in a series because I'm kind of thinking of expanding on that. But it's actually a very simple step-by-step guide how to plan your campaign using the principles of movement building and the principles of civil resistance. So, kind of you take a book, as I say in the foreword, you have 12 hours, and after those 12 hours, what you will have is a campaign plan for a campaign around the issue that you are fighting for that uses the principles of civil resistance and movement building. So it's kind of a very practical tool that kind of helps you understand the target, understand how to craft a message, understand how to sequence and innovate with tactics, and other things that are important to have a, how should I say, a campaign that can be implemented, that can be implemented effectively.